if your dream doesn't scare you, it's a task.
Oh, I like that.
So you could check it off your task list, but not off your dream list because you're nowhere near it. And yes, it is scary because if you look at the counter side of this, so I always got to accept failure before I can go for success. Is I know I have 10,000 opportunities to fail before we succeed. So we have 10,000 chances to fail before we succeed. So that's scary because knowing the size of the pickleball paddle, the fact that you can't let it bounce, you definitely can't let it go into the net. There is very little margin for error. But with that said, that's why it's a world record. That's not why it's the record of the state of Connecticut or something like that. It's not the U.S. record; it's a world record. And yeah.
Okay. So a couple things that I wanted to give you, and I wanted to really say thank you to our audience for that you may or may not know. So one of the things is that we're actually at 1.5 subscribers now on YouTube, which is huge. So I felt like it was necessary to at least say thank you to everybody that's seeing the value in what we are talking about. I think we know the value. I think when we work with myself and either other athletes, they see the value. But I think others also being willing to listen and spend the time in their day to absorb and learn something is huge. And I think we're both very grateful for. The other thing is that the most recent episode on Spotify, which with some episodes that I did before, is the 26th. And that one is on a lot of the reflection techniques that we talked about. That one got over 1,000 plays, and that's a pretty big milestone on Spotify. It's tough to penetrate that market. So we also wanted to say thank you for that. And we're going to keep moving forward and keep giving as much value as possible. So keep returning to us. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. You'll get all the latest updates. Angelo always has something cooking in the kitchen. That's for sure. So with that being said, give us some recent updates on the Guinness World Record. How's practice going still?
Well, we were there again. It's in Stamford, Connecticut at Pickleball America. And so we're just sorting out the details of our eye lines. So what I mean by that is if you're playing pickleball, your eyes don't play games with you. You're kind of focused on the ball and maybe people playing around you. If you're playing outside, maybe traffic. But when you do something for a couple of hours and you're not moving, then any movement around you, your eyes are more sensitive to. And so it's kind of like if you're an animal in the woods, like a deer, and you approach a deer, it doesn't, it's going to know the movement because everything else otherwise is still. So it's kind of like that only when you volley for hours. If you do a few minutes, it doesn't matter. But so we're on a court where there is a fixed wall behind both of us. So there's no distractions with movement. Now, the whole point is to raise money and awareness for Save the Children charity, of which Ettore works. So we do have to tolerate distractions to a certain point because we could raise more money. So there are going to be courts next to us, 2 courts over, that will be family-friendly, open play type courts. So yes, there's going to be some sounds and movements, but at least they're not going to be directly behind us. And the other thing is, behind my brother, there's a clock. And I know it's really tempting to look at the clock a lot, but I am tempted to check out the time every once in a while. We know it's going to take between 2 and 4 hours, but I really don't want to put a cap on it. kind of there's a really famous sports clip in a movie, a football movie, and it was about these young high school players that were practicing for the championship, and the senior leader was kind of goofing off, and then the coach said, well, what do you think our chances are tomorrow when they were playing against the top seed? And he was kind of like, well, I don't know, we're going to be lucky to win. And so the coach made him do crawls on his hands and toes, like kind of crawling, and he with another football player on his back, flipped upside down, and he said, well, can you go 20 yards? And something like that. And the guy's like, yeah, with no one on my back, maybe I can go. He's like, no, with someone on your back, 20 yards. And then he says, all right, I'll try. And then he goes, I want you to give it your best. And he goes, okay. He goes, your best. I want you to give it your best. He said, all right, coach. Yeah, I told you I'm going to give it my best. Yeah. Okay, one more thing. I'm going to blindfold you. He's like, why? He said, because I don't want you quitting when you think you're done. And he blindfolds them, and he does the crawl 100 yards into the end zone. It was a very dramatic clip. I remember seeing the movie live and just being really impacted by that scene. It's kind of like a little bit of a spiritual movie producing company. And it's just fascinating. And so that's why with the clock, I and the time, I don't want to say 4 hours, because then at 3 hours and 59 minutes, you're starting to turn off the gas. I want to be focused well beyond the deadline, and that way it would ensure that we do have the world record pickleball volley rally.
So really building into that, because there's a lot of gold in there just now. How do you truly not set limitations on yourself, right? Because I think everybody, things that you can't even think of or imagine or think are within your grasp, you naturally kind of put limitations on yourself, almost like with like some sort of protective mechanism, right? How do you break barriers? How do you really say, you know what? I have a dream. Here are the steps that I need to take to achieve it. What's the thought process on that? Because the story that you just gave, right, is clear. Guy thought he could maybe do 20 yards, guy on his back, puts a blindfold on him, and does 10x that, or really 5x that.
5x,
right?
Yeah.
So how do you avoid putting limitations on yourself?
Limitations are really goals.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? A limitation is a short-sighted goal. And so, the last 3 world records that we've done, I have not missed a ball. So I've hit 100,000 balls of some sort, whether it's a tennis ball or a pickleball, without a mistake. So my mind is, let's just keep that going. And the second thing, because athletes like to have control or believe that they have control. So if you believe you have control, then I'm going to end the rally on Saturday, August 17th by catching the pickleball with my left hand. That is a given. I've already mentally rehearsed it. Just like October 10th of 2021, I caught the ball successfully with my left hand when we did a countdown from 10 to 1 after having the world record, 16,046 dinks. So it's the same type of thing. The only thing in question is the blood pooled in my fingertips when we rallied for over 6 hours. And so I didn't have feel of my fingers or left hand, and my hand was twice its size. My fingers had swollen. I didn't realize it. So I was wondering why my left hand was really sore. and I barely caught the ball. I mean, I don't even know how I caught it, but it kind of stuck in between my palm and my fingers. And so my thing is, I'm actually more concerned about catching the ball when we're done than anything else.
So how does that? So when we're going back to short-sighted goals, because I love that frame, how does that connect to the fact that the most thing that you're worried about really in the rally is catching that ball at the end of the day, right? Because that's right. Because what you're getting at is that's the end goal, right? That's where you've achieved what you set out to achieve. So how do you avoid being short-sighted on your goals?
You got to be careful what you set as a goal. But the goal always has to be, there's something called stretch goals, and goals have to always be slightly beyond your grasp on your best day. So they got to be slightly beyond your grasp on your best day.
I'm gonna write that down.
And the reason why that's important is because we had talked about a previous episode about the power of hope and belief. So once you believe you can do it, you have, if there's no chance, you have to have faith. If there's some chance, you have to have belief. And so I believe we're going to set this record. And so it's beyond my grasp. It hasn't started yet, but the day is going to come. The day is going to end. That is a fact. And so I'm aligning with the fact that August 17th will come and go, that the next day, reading it online, on social media, in the newspaper, on the news is, here's the story. Here's what just happened. These guys just set their fourth world record for charity. What a cool thing, And so going back to your question, I would set your outcome goals, your big goals, your stretch goals when you're at a place of peacefulness, comfort, and confidence. Because what I realize is when you've had a bad day and you set your goal is probably going to be just get the ball in the court. And that's just not going to do anything for anybody, especially you.
Yeah.
So what I've discovered is the more precise your target, the smaller your target, the smaller your miss. The bigger your target, the bigger your miss. And so if you do goal setting, you have to put as many specifics in there as possible. So using this fourth world record as a real example, we know we have to have 10,000 or more consecutive volleys. That is a fact. So in my mind, I'm imagining what that number looks like. Is it 11,000? Is it 12,000? Is it 10,500? That would be pretty close. What is it? 20,000, 15,000? I don't know. But here's the thing. If I imagine just 10,000 and I set the goal just at 10,000, but I forget that the serve, the return, and that first shot have bounced, in which case shot number 4, my first volley, because I'm going to be catching it, so I have to make the first volley, right? So I am planning on hitting a third shot drop, and then he hits the shot, I volley it, okay? So I volley it, and now we volley for 10,000. Let's say I set the specific goal at 10,000, then we would be 3 shots short because the first 3 shots don't count because there were bounces involved. So it would be 9,997. How disappointing would that be? And so you got to set it beyond. It's beyond. And then some people say, yeah, but if something has never been done in the world before, never mind you never doing it before, then your mind shut off saying it's impossible and it doesn't really try that hard because it's not realistic. But the word realistic should be banned from goal setting.
I agree.
Because realistic is an opinion, just like impossible is, just like perfectionism is. Being perfect, being realistic, being impossible, those are all someone's opinion. And someone who has probably never done it.
Yeah.
So for me, yes, I do have the track record of setting world records in marathon activities involving racket sports. So yes, maybe some could say I have more of a quiet confidence than others, but I don't do that because I don't want any expectations. The practices they're challenging. They're really difficult. This is going to be the most difficult record of the 4 records. I just don't want to be sick that day. I just want to arrive and be normal, and whatever happens, happens. But I was just, saying hi to my mom at her grave yesterday and thinking about the record and the fact that we're doing it for her legacy and to honor her. And so for anyone who has lost a loved one, this is for you, because it's scary when you try to honor someone in some way to align with something that's never been done before, but that's okay by me. I mean, she's worth it.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing that you always emphasize and that we always emphasize is like the purpose behind it. And I think when dreams and goals are set that scare you, right? What drives you to still go and try to achieve it anyways is that purpose. Yeah. And I know we keep emphasizing that, and I know we said it many times, but it's because of the importance and the weight that it truly holds. Now, would you say, because many people say this, would you say that your stretch goals or your dream should scare you a little bit?
That's a requisite for being a dream.
Yeah.
If your dream doesn't scare you, it's a task.
Oh, I like that.
So you could check it off your task list, but not off your dream list because you're nowhere near it. And yes, it is scary because if you look at the counter side of this, so I always got to accept failure before I can go for success, is I know I have 10,000 opportunities to fail before we succeed. So we have 10,000 chances to fail before we succeed. So that's scary because knowing the size of the pickleball paddle, the fact that you can't let it bounce, you definitely can't let it go into the net. There is very little margin for error. But with that said, that's why it's a world record. That's not why it's, the record of the state of Connecticut or something like that. It's not the U.S. record. It's a world record. And, we're up for the challenge. But like you said, with purpose is tied to something that goes beyond your own ego. And ego is where fear resides because, you're afraid to hurt your ego in some way. And so once you remove the ego of it, there is no fear. It's okay. It's all joy. It's all, aren't we honored, and privileged to be doing this with so many people, supporting us in this journey? How great it is. And then I've learned, over the years, it just doesn't stop and end with raising money for Save the Children. It's inspiring others to have dreams or goals that scare them. And that is okay. When SMART goals were first developed, they got to be specific and measurable. It's an acronym for how you make your goals, and it's SMART goals. And it was developed by a global company, and they set SMART goals for their employees. And I don't know if you heard this story, but what had happened over time was the employees figured out kind of how to succeed at all of their SMART goals, and they were getting bonuses and and everything.
Oh, I know this.
And there's nothing wrong with SMART goals.
Yeah.
Okay? There's nothing wrong. But I would say a SMART goal, if they has to be realistic, which is the R in SMART. I disagree with that. That a stretch goal that is a dream is not going to be realistic. It could be specific. It could be measurable. The T is, I know, time bound. Okay, but it doesn't have to be realistic. So that's why I came up with breaking down the acronym, and I've taught and done keynotes on this, but you break down the acronym of goals into grand, optimistic, accountable, long-term, and short-term. And if you break down your goals into that, that I find is a dream goal. Grand, meaning it has to be big enough to scare you, kind of like a world record. And optimistic, you have to have that belief in yourself. We've talked about others believing you is optional, but you believing in yourself is a requisite. And then accountable. I used to have achievable in there, but I realized achievable is similar to realistic. It doesn't have to be achievable because you might not think it is, but it's got to be, you got to have someone keep you accountable to your goal, whether it's your mental skills coach, your brother, your family member, whoever it would be, and a loved one. And then long-term is usually beyond 5 years, if 5 years and beyond, and short-term would be within the current year, let's say 1 year or 1 to 3 years. So, that gives a framework, and you can expound upon each of those more, but that is the framework. And what I find is then it's easy to remember because goals and that acronym is easy to remember for people setting dream goals.
I love that. And I want to specifically talk about the accountability piece here, because I think if we reframe this, I think as you move through life, you definitely have mental shifts of multiple states, right? And as we talked about, like, as much as purpose is static, it also can be dynamic. And you find that you want to get different things out of life depending on what piece of life you're actually in. However, a lot of athletes growing up don't necessarily know their purpose and are often given goals from external sources. Sometimes their parents, sometimes their coaches, sometimes other individuals in their life. A question that, like, I have thinking back on when I was an athlete growing up is, how do I frame my goals in this situation for myself and even hold myself accountable? Because you may have that parent that maybe, I'll say, over accountable, right? Doesn't necessarily give you the, hey, good job today, right? What did we learn from this scenario? It's kind of always like, hey, here's what you could learn next. Here's what you did wrong. That parent, right? And the intent is completely right? The parent believes in you. The intent is right, but it doesn't necessarily always come off like that to you as an upcoming athlete. So for the younger athlete population, for the kids, growing up before high school, in high school, even college, how do you set goals for yourself that were necessarily almost given to you, and now you just need to reframe them a little bit so that you are more aligned and you are more accountable with yourself?
Yeah, there's two resources that people can go to. Believe me, I'm not the be all end all on any of these concepts, but there's two resources. Mind Valley from Vishen Lakiani, and I've spoke with him via Zoom a few times and done his courses. And also a friend of mine, Serrano Kelly, he's the author of a book called The 90-Day Game. And I've done a couple of 90-day games with athletes that I've coached before or been their mental coach of. And when you do a 90-day game, the way it works is every morning or every time during the day where you can make it. Weekends are optional, holidays are optional, and when you're sick is optional. But you can do it on those days too if you want. So what you do is you budget between 10 minutes and 30 minutes. And so let's say, for example, I was your accountability partner. You becoming a professional pickleball player. You would call me at 5 a.m. every morning, Monday through Friday. You can't miss, you can't be late. And you would say, okay, coach, here are the 5 things that I accomplished yesterday that are specifically related to my stretch goals of being a professional pickleball player. And then likewise, since it's a partner, I would report to you for, let's say, preparing for the world record. Here is what I've done yesterday to prepare for the world record, right? So it's kind of like this. It is much easier to press the snooze button on yourself. It is really difficult to press the snooze button with someone that you like and respect, because you're going to do it more for the relationship than for yourself at times when you're feeling under the weather. And how I know this to be true is that I had aspirations of getting up when I ran an internet company with my brother. I had aspirations of running every morning at 5 a.m. And I remember right when winter came and it got cold out, it was like, no, I'm in my warm bed. I just want my hot coffee. I'm good. So it was very easy not to do it. So then I got my brother involved and our good friend John. And, we'd get up, we'd meet at a certain location at 5 a.m. and we'd run. And we never missed. And it was because I knew that he would be sitting there waiting when it's still dark out at 5 a.m. somewhere. And I wasn't going to let him down. Right. And so if you have that accountability partner, you're not going to let that person down, because there are certain times where it's not going your way and it's easy for you to let yourself down and it goes unnoticed. But if you let someone else down, so the true story is there was 2 professional aspiring pro players that I was coaching in tennis. And this one woman, young woman, she was so driven. And we did 90 days straight every day. I'm pretty sure we did weekends. It was like 5 or 6 in the morning. I can't remember. It was more me doing it for her and type of thing. But we both showed up, did our things, and it was remarkable. And then, matter of fact, it was so good that 90 days we actually started to roll over into another 90 days. But I would probably recommend just sticking to 90 days, getting it done, and then building the structure and positive habits to achieve other things in your life. But then there was this other player I was working with as well, and what I realized is that when you're doing something special, so for you, give me a real example, Al, of you're preparing for a tournament that is your next tournament. What date is that again?
August 5th.
August 5th. Give me today something that you would do to prepare for August 5th. Give me something.
Anything. Visualization, mental rehearsals.
Mental rehearsals of what?
The games that I'd be playing from a point-to-point basis.
Okay. So are you going to have all those done by tomorrow?
I think I'll have many of them repeated over a period of time between 2 weeks out, right?
So see, what you have to do is then you have to make that more specific. So
Okay.
So by tomorrow, if we were to talk tomorrow morning at 5 a.m., what amount of mental rehearsal can you commit to in prep for August 5th?
So let's reframe for a little bit, because we do practice tomorrow morning, right?
Oh.
So just so that we're sticking with today, right? What am I going to commit to today for our practice tomorrow? I would say that we usually play 6 games. So I'm going to overcommit and say I'm going to do 7 games by tomorrow.
Okay. 7 games by tomorrow.
Yes.
So let me ask you this. 7 games by tomorrow.
Yep.
If we didn't talk, would you do that visualization for 7 games by tomorrow? Like, in other words, would you normally do that as part of your prep for tomorrow?
Not that amount. No.
So that would be a stretch goal then. What I'm getting at is where people get confused, because I had one player that was trying to go on the pro tour.
Yeah.
We set all these things up. I talked to him the next day. He's like, great. I strung 3 of my tennis rackets today. And I was like, okay, is that part of your goal or stretch goal? Because were you going to string 3 anyways? Yeah. Well, no, that's your task list. That's already there. No. What you do above and beyond your task list represents the daily progress toward your stretch goal. So what I'm getting at is, if let's say you were to visualize only 5 games normally for tomorrow, but now you're going to do all 7, then that would be an acceptable stretch goal prep. But if it's just 5, you're doing that anyways. You don't need an accountability partner to keep you accountable to stuff you're going to do on a daily basis anyways.
It's your routine.
Your routine. You're not going to put work out, brush your teeth, and all of that. That's going to happen one way or another without me. So what the fascinating thing I found with stretch goals is this: when you write it down, and I've come up with the power of 1. I mean, obviously I love the number 3. You know, I love the number 3, but the power of 1. Put one thing down that you normally would not do by tomorrow that is directly in line with winning the tournament that you're playing on August 5th. That's where we want to live. And then what you do is you end up prioritizing that as, if I get nothing else done in my life, if I just get that one thing done by tomorrow, I'm good. And it's all of a sudden it shifts, that your focus becomes not only the stretch goal, but only the stretch goal. And you make sure that you get that one thing done so you can report to someone on it.
So for me, I would say that something that is a real stretch goal that we discussed is doing daily mental rehearsals, so that I'm getting the most out of every session that we do. And I know that we talked about that a little while ago. So that has been, in all honesty, my one stretch goal leading up to the tournament, is doing mental rehearsals every single day, with usually, I will say, the intent of what I'm doing the day after. So for example, we have practice tomorrow. I will 100% be rehearsing all the games that we play at the kitchen line, whether it is dink patterns, whether it is topspin, backspin, dead dinks, whatever I am doing, I will work the pattern in my brain so that when I get in that situation, I'm already prepared for it. But yeah, my stretch goal is doing that every single day and making it accountable for what I'm doing tomorrow. And I will tell you that it totally has pushed me. And I think that is, even to give validity to this, if I'm being honest with you, I've been in a period in the past, let's say, couple weeks, where I wasn't playing at the level that I wanted to be playing at, right? And with introducing this stretch goal and Angelo holding me accountable to it, yesterday I played, and I probably played, I'll say, a lot better, or even at the level that I know I'm capable of currently, right? And we talked about maybe not from a physical standpoint, but from a consistency standpoint for sure. And the only reason that occurred is because not only did I set a stretch goal, but I also have stuck to that stretch goal. And I've utilized it to actually now in gameplay say, I've already went through this scenario in my head. I'm ready for this moment. And those are also consistent of times where I'm behind or I have missed a dink or I did miss a 3/4 roll outside that I usually hit and it was just a 1 on the paddle, right? I prepared for those because if you go into those scenarios and you didn't rehearse them, you now miss a dink and you're like, plans out the water, everything's screwed up. I didn't prepare for this. I'm not ready. And then before you know it, you're in your own head. You're thinking, you're overwhelmed. The nerves get the best of you. And then you're not performing even close to where you can. But because I prepared for not only working the patterns, also being behind, also missing shots, I was ready for that when that occurred. Even when Angelo goes, I'll say kamikaze at the net, he is so ready for a shake and bake. You see him just coming at you like a train. That's the one thing I did not prepare for in my mental rehearsal. So that will be fully implemented and added the next time around. That's for sure.
Yeah, good.
Transitioning into this too. So I want to talk about mental rehearsals. I want to talk about visualization because I was doing it, but not getting the full value out of it that it really deserves. And that was because, in all honesty, I was doing it a little bit wrong. Do you want to talk about really what is the way to go about doing these mental rehearsals so that you get the value you deserve out of it?
Yeah, and I would say, I don't know if it was necessarily wrong. I would say less effective, maybe. Right or wrong is kind of like an opinion, and it's really up to the athlete. I remember, Pete Sampras didn't like to practice a lot. So hey, he didn't work out a lot besides the team practice. If he was playing for Davis Cup and all that, and it's fine. He knew his limits. He knew what was best for him. Maybe he didn't want to overtrain and hurt himself. Maybe he didn't want to overthink the moment. Who knows? It's different for everyone. But the most effective way I found to imagine, and I try to use the word imagery more than visualization because visualization can be deceptive even though it's overused. Visual, if you say visualize, most people don't do it in their mind's eye. They use their eyeballs.
Can you tell us what the mind's eye is? Give us a reference to that.
So like right now, you said you're going to do 7 mental rehearsal for 7 games for tomorrow.
Yeah.
When you're playing those games, do you see yourself as if you're videotaping it, or do you see yourself out of your own eyes?
Out of my own eyes. First person point of view.
First person. So basically, you're never going to see your back. You're never really going to see the back of your legs. You're never going to see your own eyes and face and head. You're going to see your paddle, your grip, your forearm, what's in front of you. So that's first person. That tends to be the most effective way to imagine things. And that's why I say imagine. So your mind's eye is you're watching yourself of what you're doing, but you have all the smells, you're using all the senses, you hear the sounds, you're putting yourself in the moment. You're not watching a pre-recorded episode of you playing. And yeah, visualization, I would say, is good for technique. So if you want to see how you're balanced and you want to see the back of your hand go up the back of the ball in a circular fashion for a topspin dipper, that's different. I'm talking about imagery for success, that what I call deja vu moment of I've been here before. I've been down 10-5 and won 12-5. I know what that feels like, sounds like, what all of the other senses you are, like proprioception and your balance and grip pressure. all of that. You know what that is like. That is in your mind's eye, is you can see yourself doing it from your own eyes. And it's hard. It takes a lot of effort and discipline. You can't have distractions around you. A lot of times you're going to close your eyes and do it. You want to be breathing. You want to be aware of your surroundings. You definitely do not want to do this if you're driving a vehicle, I will say. But again, as far as wrong or right, I would say first person I've found is better for outcome, and visualization third person is better for technique. And then you got to tie together the beginning, middle, and end. So a lot of people, if they want to work on the block volley, forehand block volley, I'm not blocking it deep enough. So I want to, visualize myself blocking 1,000 in a row. Boom, 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 just like you do against your board. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's technique. That's technique. Because studies show that then when you go the next day with 1,000 of these, you're never going to hit 1,000 of these in a row. So your mind doesn't do that deja vu thing. I've been here before. The reason why been here before is so powerful because it creates a crease toward the future success, because then you've already been there. So now you just have to travel along that same path. I mean, did you know how they build sidewalks on campuses? Do you know how they build sidewalks? Do you ever hear this story?
I haven't. Tell me it, but I know where you're getting at it, but tell me anyways.
They plant grass. They don't put the sidewalks in for a year. They have the students go wherever they want. And then where the grass is dead because they've trampled over it consistently, that's where they put the sidewalks.
Smart.
So that's like creating a crease with mental skills rehearsal and visualization or imagery. Your imagery creates the crease so that when you're there, it doesn't feel so foreign. It feels more normal, almost expected. Here I go. I'm finding my way home, and it's a really interesting feeling. And when it's starting to happen, you don't question it. You don't make it happen. You let it happen. And some people say forcing it. Well, that's when you're trying to make it happen. You don't force it. You just let it happen. It is what it is. So I would say there, number one, it has to be really specific. Number two, it has to include the entire contest, beginning, middle, end. And number three, you got to look at yourself through your own mind's eye. So you're seeing yourself in first person, although third person can be used, but that's used more for refining your technique.
So what I was just writing down was, to kind of validate this, was a story you told me about the free throws. And the only reason that it is in my brain is because I just re-listened to the episode on it. And I believe I just posted it over on Spotify. So to validate that, team goes from last place and in free throw shooting, right?
Free throw percentage in the country, yes.
And rather than the coach having them shoot thousands of free throws, he would blow the whistle during practice and I'll have them shoot two. So logically, you'd be like, well, they're not getting that much reps in. But to validate your point, what they were building was that exact scenario come game day where you are playing, there's a foul, the whistle is blown, you shoot two shots and you move on to the next play. So when they got in that scenario in the game, their brain goes, and maybe they go it consciously and then it becomes subconscious, but they're like, I've been here before. Free throw, move on. And they went to first, correct? It was first in free throw shooting percentage?
First in the country, yeah.
By the end of the season. So if anything, do you remember what team was that? Do you know?
I don't remember. It's a college team.
I'll have to look it up because I've read that. I read a similar story. I believe it was in a book I read called The Confident Mind too.
Okay.
So I think the college is in there. But either way, to sum that up, that validates that, like you said, technique. And I noticed that the reason I'm speaking to this is because I literally just lived it real time. I was taking what I was doing on my board, which shout out to Enhanced Pickleball, not a sponsor, but I'm going to tell you it's a great product. They have the Dink Master, so I use it because you just get so many reps in such a short period of time. In 90 minutes, I could put 10,000 balls in my paddle. So it's insane. But what you're getting at is by me doing that over and over and over and over and over again in my brain, yes, does it give me a better feel for the shot, but it doesn't replicate the scenario in the game. Where I have switched that is now when I visualize, when I upgrade it to also imagery and including all of the different senses involved, I now, literally yesterday, when Angela and I had our mental skills call, I go, Ange, something that I did was I also did the mental rehearsal, and I was able to actually, in the points, say to myself, I've been here before. Great. We've done this. We're ready. And then I was prepared. So living that real time, I could validate that point. That's exactly what you need to do. And that was the difference for me heavily, was that you don't necessarily need to think that you're going to take 10,000 reps in a row in the same shot unless you're Angelo trying to break a Guinness World Record, right? It's a little bit of a different story.
That would be mental rehearsal for me.
Yeah.
10,000 would be the mental rehearsal.
Exactly, right? But that is the point, is you're replicating the exact scenario that you're putting yourself in.
Yeah.
And therefore, when you step in, you're like, okay, I've been here before. I've done this mental rehearsal hundreds of times. It's just another day out here taking 10,000 reps, right? So there was just something so validating about that. And then the biggest point that I wanted to comment on to get into was the other element of why including the start and the finish specifically is so important. And yes, there's elements in the middle that you want to include, but why the start and the finish are really the most important aspects, with a little bit of detail in between.
So if you don't include the finish, then your mind gets lost part of the way through because it doesn't know how the story ends. And you want to end the story with you being on top, you being invigorated, you validating all the hard work is starting to pay off, those things. So, you do the beginning, middle, parts of it is okay. But then once you reach uncharted territory, then your mind is going to kind of freak out. Like, I don't know what to do next. And, it's kind of funny because it works both ways. It's funny, being a tennis player, and anyone who has played tennis can relate to what I'm about to say, but someone serves a huge serve. It is just out and you hit the ball back, and as you're hitting it back, you call it out, and it's the best return of your life. And you're like, why can't I return that like that when it's in? And it's because what happens is your mind knows the ball is out in that moment, so it swings freely for the first time because you're not tying the outcome to the swing. So when you don't tie outcomes to swings, like in pickleball, then you can have a 3 on freely. And that's what freely is. Going back to the imagery, you have to have the beginning because you got to know where to start. You got to have detail of the middle so you know where you are. And you got to have the detail of what happened at the end. So when you arrive there, you're there. Kind of like your GPS, in your car.
Yeah. And the reason I wanted to emphasize that was because that was 110% a missing piece for me. Was you're rehearsing all of these games and you're not necessarily always getting to the finish line in each one. I think where I got lost was, okay, I'm going to rehearse my serve and my return, and I'm going to rehearse a bunch of points in between and technically not focus on the outcome. But ultimately, when you don't close that gap, like you said, your brain gets lost on where it needs to go. And yesterday was a big brain blast for me, really. And it showed on the court was that throughout the entire match, because my brain and really knew where it was going, it was prepared for all the scenarios, and I got that feedback and kept that confidence regardless, because I knew where the finish line was, right? And it is not about the finish line, but it's about preparing for the scenarios that can be there, right? And I think that's what really took me to a whole nother level of mental rehearsal and honestly confidence as a player moving forward, was doing that and understanding the importance of it.
Yeah.
So, Ange, thank you for your time today. I want to emphasize August 17th, Pickleball America, roughly 9 a.m. start, right?
Noon.
Noon. We're going to start at noon.
Noon.
Roughly noon start. Feel free to come and watch. Once again, we will have the link down below in the show notes for Save the Children. That'll be rallyforcharity.org. Click on it. Go and donate freely from now throughout the entire week up to the event. And we'll see you next week. But Ange, thank you very much.
Sounds great.